Here's a question for you. What is the worst Fire Emblem game? Is it Tokyo Mirage Sessions for not representing the franchise in every way and failing as a crossover altogether? Is it Radiant Dawn for being stupidly hard, having a really dumb main character, and overall being really a 50-50 game? Or is it Fire Emblem Awakening for increasing the Avatar's role in the story and adding a bunch of characters with crazy anime level quirks and having arguably bland map design? Because let's all be honest here, there is no way that Fire Emblem could ever be as good as it was back in the GBA days. Or can it? If you take the time to look, you can find that a lot of the mistakes that people like to use to claim that Awakening ruined the franchise have already been made since the franchise came to the West. In fact, even before then, as a lot of them stem actually out of Binding Blade. As such, I'm making this video to finish off my Fire Emblem trilogy, so to speak, and hopefully find a definitive answer to the question, did Awakening ruin the franchise? Which, no it didn't, it really didn't, come on guys. Also, if you're curious as to why this is a Fire Emblem trilogy, I will put annotations up on screen which will take you to my other two Fire Emblem videos, which I highly recommend you watch before going into this one, as I tend to reference them later on. With that all out of the way, this video will largely focus on the GBA games, while I will touch minor points on both Fire Emblem Path of Radiance and a little bit of FE4. But, other than that, I will not be talking about Radiant Dawn, because there's enough wrong with that game to warrant its own video. And anything I say in regards to modern Fire Emblem is praising it for something it did better than the classic series. And, with that all being said, let's jump right in. Fire Emblem is a game that is heavily character-based, and being as such, you'd think there'd be a lot of focus on the characters, and yes, that is completely true for every game in the series. The GBA games have probably some of the best, most well-rounded casts in the entire series, and a lot of the common complaints surrounding the newer games is that the casts just simply aren't as well written. While I largely agree with this, I do think that there are certain characters from the newer games who are downright better than those written in the GBA games. And even those characters that people like to bring up who have really strange quirks that don't make sense for characters have already showed up in past games, thus rendering that entire argument moot. Now, being 100% honest, however, they definitely aren't as plentiful as they are in the newer games, but they are still present if you take the time to look. For example, I use Ileana for example. She is literally the exact same as Effie, except not a knight, pretty much. Again, depending on how you look at it, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it takes away from a lot of the better writing that the series is supposed to be known for. That also being said, I'd also argue that the newer games, from a gameplay standpoint concerning every unit in the newer Fire Emblem games is viable, which is awesome. I'm a strong believer in the fact that you should use what units you like to use. If you want to use a pre-promoted unit, go ahead. If you want to use a unit who doesn't have that many supports, go ahead. Every unit is pretty much viable because they all have excellent growths, and due to the reclass system, their stats can get just as high as if you raised any other unit from level 1 to level 2020. The older games suffer from giant balancing issues when it comes to units. Binding Blade being a special example of this. Binding Blade's units are so lopsided, where you have characters like Rutger, who can get over 102% critical hit, and then you have characters like Sophia, which just boggle the mind of how bad they are. And as much as I'd like to use units like Noel or Duacel in Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones, I can't, because just so many other units completely outclass them. And due to there being no reclass system, I can't use them no matter how much I like their character or their design. Additionally, a lot of the older games aren't very accessible to the new players, aside from Fire Emblem 7, which suffers its own problem having a gigantic forced tutorial the first time you play it, only skippable upon your third playthrough when you unlock hard mode and you can actually skip it, which is ridiculous, to be honest. And even then, Lynn's campaign really doesn't even do anything for the story. It doesn't contribute very much to the plot of the game later on, and it doesn't do anything to tie into Binding Blade at all. Speaking of, the entirety of Lynn's existence basically throws the continuity of Binding Blade completely out the window, as due to the fact how such a major character Lynn was within Fire Emblem 7, and the fact that she can marry either Eliwood or Hector or Wrath, it basically means that you now have a super important character who gets no mention whatsoever, and not to mention is the potential mother of two very important story characters, and a third character who is arguably the best choice, thus meaning that because of how little she's mentioned, the only possible choice is for her to be Sue's mother, but due to the way the Hector and Lynn supports are set up, it makes them more canon, and this is why the continuity is screwed up. And Sacred Stones over there, just with its wonderful... I will defend Sacred Stones to hell and back, trust me. But, good God, the characters in that game, its cast is super good, but you struggle to find any units who are actually useful. I find myself basically rotating the same maybe 15 or 20 Sacred Stone units out of that game's, I think, 30 some odd cast. Like, there's 10 units, not counting creature campaign units, who are just completely useless to your team. And that is really dumb. For how strong the cast is, I want to be able to use every single member. I want to experience every single support. I don't want to have to bring Serene to every match just so I can support her with Gilliam. I don't want to do that. I just want to use Gilliam and get it over with. The fact that so many other units are outclassed by other units, and the fact that just it's really archaic game design. The new games have just smoothened everything out. And why do legendary weapons have durability? I mean, Nailfire doesn't have any durability, and it's a legendary weapon. Why do they have durability? I don't know. It brings up another problem that, to be honest, Fates did a great job of fixing. So, speaking of archaic gameplay, that's a great transition into my next point. I'm not exactly sure whether it's because Awakening was my first Fire Emblem game, or the fact that it just streamlined the gameplay that much. But when I went back to Fire Emblem 7, after playing Awakening for the first time, it was a little difficult adjusting. Firstly, the whole Constitution system, while it took me a while to get used to it, and I definitely think that that's how they should have gone about balancing Fates' weapon system, of course refined it a little bit. That thing caught me off guard when adjusting to it. Again, it makes sense, but it's kind of pointless realism if you have the durability and the Constitution system. It just seems like you're punishing the player too much by having both Constitution and durability. Personally, I think when it comes to the weapon system, Awakening had it in the right, in the sense that they removed the Constitution, but they kept the durability, as well as increasing the overall durability of every weapon. while lowering the growth rates of the classes that benefited from having no constitution, so that it balanced things out a little. Thus, Swordmasters and Pegasus Knights weren't utterly broken, unless you count the skills, but I just think that when it comes to skills, those need to be nerfed in their own way, and Fates isn't doing that anytime soon, so take with that what you will. But either way, a lot of the old gameplay mechanics, Fog of War, I hate that. A lot of the boat chapters sucked, and Sacred Stones, because of its map screen and how that game was designed and the trainee classes, Sacred Stones just wasn't challenging at all unless you played in the highest difficulty and went Ephraim's route. Which brings me another thing. Sacred Stones' route system is a little half-baked, because if you choose Erica's route, you miss out on basically the entirety of Lion's character arc, and arguably the better character arc for Lion. While if you choose Ephraim's route, you miss out on the entire backstory of the Demon King, and the motivations for both Joshua and Cormac's character arcs. Meaning that you have to play through the game twice on the highest difficulty in order to get the full story. And even then, you're still missing out on stuff from the other path when you play each specific path. And the reason I'm complaining about it in Sacred Stones rather than Fates is because Fates, that was what the entire game was centered around on. This double route system in Sacred Stones feels more like an afterthought that was tacked on when they could have easily just made one solid path and made the overall game a lot longer, which would have been a lot more beneficial to Sacred Stones as a whole. And you knew this would come up again. The Forest tutorial in Fire Emblem 7. I dare you to find one good thing that came out of Lynn's campaign other than her story arc. There is no benefit to playing it other than you get some character motivation for Lynn. Which, while Lynn is a very well-written character, that's all you get. There's no reason to play other than that, and you get early access to use Wrath. That's it. That's it. You don't build support points, and even then, supports are kind of pointless in the GBA games, because even though they provide a really good boost, you can only do 5 per character, making your support log a pain to fill out, which it isn't in the newer games because they removed that limit. Again, the newer games just streamline everything. Ugh. With that being said, I think that about does it for me. I'm going to go ahead on to the closing thoughts. So, in the end, I'm really sick of hearing all of this Awakening ruined the franchise shtick, because honestly, it really didn't. And you know what? Just, if you took the time to look, you could have seen that the series was heading in that direction anyway. So, I'm honestly not sure why nobody expected it. Wow, that sounded really pretentious. But, anyways, enjoy the Fire Emblem games you want to enjoy, be they new, old, or just all of them in general. Don't let anybody on the internet tell you that the old games are better or the new ones save the franchise, because they're all great games that you should definitely give a chance. So, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this Fire Emblem trilogy here on my channel, and if and when there's a Fire Emblem 15, I'll be sure to do a hopes video, or I could even do that as my next video, what do I want out of Fire Emblem 15 video. That would be cool, I guess. So, I have been ZerkMonsterHunter 4. Drop me a comment down below, tell me why you think I'm right, think I'm wrong, or think I'm an asshole. And as always, no matter what games you like to play, happy hunting.